the ones that are attending the meeting. Just a couple of updates. Jared has resigned. He moved on to, now he's the CFO for the town of Fairfield. And so I have asked Sarah Sanders if she could share this committee, the finance committee, and she has gratefully accepted. So with that, I will have Sarah to run the meeting.
Commissioners?
Yes.
So we have an agenda today. We'll open the meeting. The first item is authorization to commence necessary preparation for the 2021 Series A bond issue. Ed Miskowski.
Good morning. You have in your package the standard single-family resolution to authorize the issuance of bonds to continue funding single-family home ownership. This will be the first issuance for the 2021 calendar year for single family. The resolution is for the issuance of up to 150 million of bonds. The actual amount of bonds to be issued for lendable proceeds are probably in a range of 120 million. The remainder of the issuance authorization will be used to refund previously issued bonds. The bond issue is expected to close by the end of February, but as always will depend upon market conditions. The book runner is chosen among the 4 senior managers that were approved by the board. So the book runner for this issue will be Citigroup. Are there any questions?
I just have Jerry Abrahams, just one question. When will the staff undertake a new RFP process and new selection of managers and co-managers and selling group members?
We're on a 3-year cycle. The one just approved will be going into our 3rd year. So the current cycle will end December of 2021. So most likely next summer, sometime in the summer, do we go out with an RFP to have the next team on board to start January 1 of 2022.
All right. And I know in some past meetings, I just want to make sure that Hazim, that we when we do that process, we pay special attention to the number of minority and women-owned firms in the co-manager group and selling group.
Yes, that's correct.
I will make a note that the Treasurer's Office just completed an RFP, and a lot of firms came in that are disabled veteran-owned firms, which is a whole nother category of kind of emerging to consider.
Yes, and we currently have Drexel Hamilton as one of our co's, and we also have Bancroft as one of the selling member.
May I have a motion to move this resolution?
I'll move.
Second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Any discussion further? I guess we'll need a roll call.
Jerry Abrahams,
Aye.
Tim Hodges,
Yes.
Kathy McKinnon,
Aye.
George Perez,
Yes.
Franklin Perry,
Aye.
Sarah Sanders,
Aye.
Gwendolyn Thames.
Okay. Our next item is the resolution regarding the adoption of the annual budget and the plan for operations for 2021.
Okay, good morning. Last month I shared with the board a draft of the 2021 budget along with the plan of operations. I just want to note here, since the presentation of last month, we made a few changes to it. So Amy, can you go to the next page? So the first thing that we did was to finalize the amount for the investment trust account, or ITA, and the opportunity fund account. So if you scroll down to this page, you would see the amount now has been finalized to about 23.3 million for the ITA and 9.8 million for the Opportunity Fund. Next page. The next thing we changed because of the feedback we received from the board, we removed the merit increase. So now the budget is 41.6 million instead of 42.1 million. That also impacted the year-over-year change. So previously it was 4.4%, now it's down to 3.2% or 1.3 billion higher than the 2020 budget. That also impacts the computation for number 8, which is the net income, which has been adjusted up to 878,000. Next page, please. We also change item number 1 under the plan of operations. This has been increased to 837 million. 0.6, and that's because one, we had the change in the computation for private activity bond volume cap based on their IRS revenue procedure. So they increased the computation per capita from $105 to $110, along with we now have the final number for the ITA and the Opportunity Fund. Next page, I think we should go to next page. Another page. Next one. Next one. Next. Next page, Exhibit 5. Okay. So this is the breakdown of what I mentioned. So the first line item, the 2021 Texas Ambana allocation, previously it was 225 million. Now it is 235 million. If you take a look at footnote number 1, that's per the computation where previously it was the number of population times $105, now is 110. So that makes up the additional 10 million. You can also see because we have now the final amount for ITA, which is reflected there, $23,334,135, along with the Opportunity Fund of $9,947,502. So just like what was previously discussed during the capital study, the Opportunity Fund comes from 50% of net interest from the general resolution, and then the remaining 50% goes into ITA along with the principal receipt from existing ITA loans. Next page. Next one. So there is no change on this page, no change on this page. Next page. No change on this page. Okay, so this is the section where we remove under personnel, where we remove the merit increase. Previously, it would have.
I'm sorry, Hazim, can you tell me which page you're on? Just I'm looking at it.
Oh, you're looking at a
paper.
page. Oh, okay.
Yes.
So right now we are on page 4 under the budget appendix description.
Chart number 6.
Chart number 6 is the chart, but I'm referring to the text above.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So what was presented last month, or what we shown in our draft, was salary increase would have shown an increase of about 429,000 year over year. So now it's only an increase of 181,000 because we remove the merit increase. And then under the fringe, it also has a corresponding impact because, you know, for every dollar that we pay, we have to contribute 92.6 cents. So the change now has gone down from 1,249,000 year over year to 1,018,000 year over year. And then I did include and insert the breakdown where the 92.6% of fringe, 64% of it is for pension, 21% is for health insurance, and the remaining is for FICA. So that's the only thing that was changed. Those were the things that were changed since the last presentation. So I'll be happy to answer any questions the committee have.
Hazim, it's Tim. I do have a few questions, and a couple of them I think we can probably take offline because it's more for my education than anything else.
Sure.
But I want to make sure I actually got this correct. So tell me where I'm wrong. If I'm looking at the projected versus the actual, right, that page, it essentially says to me that our interest expense is going to increase by $10 million, and that the operating budget is going to increase by, call it 6. And net income basically is going to go from 16 million to $1 million, round numbers. So
right,
essentially we're taking out $15 million. That $15 million, again, 10 million is the interest expense, but then the other 6 million, there's, call it 3 or 2.5 million, or I guess it's 3 million from personnel salaries. And then we've got essentially the rest of it coming out of other expenses, and 2.5 million of that is from foreclosure and REO disposition. Am I reading that correctly? So that $15 million is personnel and other expenses.
yes.
Okay. And so so we think that we're going to go from 1 million to 2.5 in terms of foreclosure related activities.
That's a budget, that's a reserve.
Okay. Okay. So
And-
it's essentially a reserve. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And then lastly, and I appreciate you in terms of explaining the difference in terms of the salary item, but we've still got, we've got projected basically 13 million, and we've got a proposed budget of 14.3, which is still higher than what we adopted last year. What if it's not merit increases? What does that $1.3 million entail? Are those positions that have not been filled, or what's the 1.3 difference?
It's the one that you just mentioned is the position that's not been filled.
Okay, so we think so that still you would still kind of review that as or consider that a reserve, because it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to fill all $1.3 million worth of positions over the next year.
Well, so currently we are running around 129 FTEs, and one of the things that since when Nandini came on board, and in terms of the direction that she would like us to pursue, one of the things that we told her not to rush into is to ensure we have a plan, and that plan was the strategic plan. So the idea was to try to align and ensure that from a leadership standpoint and the direction that the board would like to take, that's after that is when we are going to start filling in key positions.
Okay.
And of course, the other challenge too is under the current environment, i.e. COVID, is so difficult to try to find and fill those positions. So what we're trying to do is, in terms of the budget, is to have the means to pursue the right candidates, and those candidates will then help us achieve our goal. So when we plan and then try to come up with the necessary budget, we did assume, as stated in the memo, an increase of FTE from 142 to 143. But then we are also laddering it. So we're not making an assumption that we will start the year at 143. If we had we assumed that, the amount would be much, much larger. So this, in fact, is assuming a strategic or like a straddle type of a hiring over the course of 2021.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm going to ask one more question. You said from
Sure.
142 to 143.
Yes,
So, okay.
that's
okay.
in the memo.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
I have a question. This is George. First of all, I appreciate the questions you asked, and because I had a couple of them myself, so you took care of that. But in answering his questions, you made a comment, Hasim, that I'm curious about, that they had difficulty hiring people on the COVID-19 situation. Can you expand on that? Because we've hired people in my agency, and to be honest with you, we have not experienced any issues. In fact, it's been easier.
Well, I think the difficulty, and let me clarify, the difficulty is not trying to find people, is the difficulty trying to align our needs, because we have a lot of competing needs, and we do want to address all the situation.
Right, but that's nothing to do with the current situation per se.
Yeah.
I mean, you may have some new positions related to the current situation, but it's not the process. Because to be honest with you, we've had more people applying than normal, and the quality has been much higher than normal. Meaning, they may have masters, they may have a law degree and a master and an accounting degree.
Right.
In fact, the pool has been much more educated and it's been bigger. So from that perspective, it's more challenging to narrow it down.
Understood, but I'm assuming, Commissioner, you're
No,
not asking us to rush.
You made a comment that it is difficult, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, this is Kathy. What assumptions have you made related to COVID in terms of, bringing staff back to the building, increases in home ownership and sort of, returning to some sense of normal, whatever that might be now?
So those things we did incorporate it in the plan that Nandini presented last month. So in terms of the year one, from the budget standpoint, what we are doing is we just want to ensure that there's sufficient funds to address those needs. So for example, a question that Tim asked previously about the foreclosure expenses. We do know that while it's much higher than what we have been experiencing, we know that once everything is back, quote unquote, to semi-normal, then we have to have the means to pay for those type of expenses.
But in terms of your overall operations, because the operating expense has gone down significantly in 2020.
Right. So what we did, we spoke with staff, and then we spoke about, what would be the plan going into 2021. And when you look at the year over year, we did address on, for example, training. What type of trainings do staff would need going into 2021? Are we going to still see a lot of, conferences per se? So there are certain things when we were looking at that, and then we were trying to predict, are we still going to be in, even post-COVID, even when there's vaccine available, do we feel that staff is comfortable to travel? So there are certain things that we feel we're not really back to normal. So those things were adjusted back. But then at the same time, things where we feel like there's going to be more assistance or in terms of counseling, certain things of that nature, we left the budget the same, even though we haven't expanded, because we know that there's going to be a lot more need in those areas. So it was very targeted. In terms of, getting the office ready, you can see we essentially did not change the numbers. I think the one that what we experienced leading up to, or I would say like sometime in the summer, when there was a plan to bring some staff back, we were having difficulty procuring the equipment, the plexiglass, those type of things. But right now, if you would like to take a look at where we are at, we already have the arrows, we already have all the shields all established. But then we're still asking our staff not to go back in. So in some way we are ready, but then at the same time, we know that if there's more guidance in terms of how we can keep our staff safe, we'll definitely will pursue it.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think all we all need is a crystal ball that will tell us
Right.
what the next 6 months will bring.
Absolutely.
Questions for Hazim? You have a motion on the budget?
I'll move it, Kathy.
Second,
Tim,
any further discussion? We'll have a roll call.
Jerry Abrahams,
Aye.
Tim Hodges,
yes.
Kathy McKinnon,
Aye.
George Perez,
Yes.
Franklin Perry,
Aye.
Sarah Sanders,
Yes.
and I'm not sure if Gwendolyn Thames is on. Motion passes. No, sorry.
Oh, there's another.
That was an A vote.
Extra vote right there.
Confirmed.
Our next item is the 2021 Finance Audit Committee calendar of meetings. And is this a voting item or is this just a recommendation to the board?
This is just a recommendation. So as we, since this is our last meeting for the year, and as we plan for 2021, we would like to share with the committee and get some feedback about the calendar. Because as everybody knows, previously committee meetings was only for half an hour, and then we changed the times. And now committee begins at 9 o'clock through to 10 o'clock, and then the board meeting starts at 10. So we just would like to get some feedback from finance committee members about the calendar, about the time, whether committee members like it, dislike it, or any feedback that you can provide to us.
Well, it's interesting now that we are doing our meetings by Zoom, there's not the travel time. So the 9 o'clock is easier, I'd say. But do you think we might continue to use Zoom even post-COVID?
I do not know. I think that yeah, I would defer to the full board. So we're just trying to get feedback because then we will plan around what the board desires.
Yeah. The half hour did seem tight many times, not always, but.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the Zoom option should always be available, but I mean, I look forward to meeting in person from time to time.
Okay. Yeah, I think
why not?
I like the 9 o'clock. I like the 9 o'clock hour because it, gives us an actual hour. A half an hour was tight time frame.
Any other feedback for Hazim? There, next few items are reports. The first is the 2020 Series E bond issue, single family report from Hazim and Bank of America.
Okay, so here with us this morning, two individuals from BofA, Barbara Feldman and Joseph Menito. So we are going to provide, just like any other bond deal that we did, to provide a color what transpired during the sale. So I have a memo, just just to summarize what happened. But then at the same time, I don't want to take away from Joe, who has his wonderful charts. So Joe, take it away.
Yeah, sure. Barbara, did you want to give a couple of opening statements?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I just wanted to express my appreciation for allowing Bank of America Securities to lead manage this deal. And I was going to give you the 2-minute overview and sort of the context of the markets that we were in, and Joe's going to go through it in more detail. I'm sure you heard from the underwriters of the last transaction how not chaotic, but volatile the markets have been. The week that we priced, which was the week of October 21st, were also characterized by volatility and supply. I think there was about $19 billion of municipal debt in that week alone. So people were sort of spooked by the election. They didn't know how things were going to turn out or if we'd even have an answer. And they were also just overwhelmed with the supply of things. And that created an interesting environment for pricing. You may have heard that also in the last, for your last deal, but without further ado, I'll turn it over to Joe, who'll talk a little more in detail.
Great, thank you, Barbara. Can folks actually see me? Because I don't know whether I've done anything to sort of mess up my camera.
You're good, Joe.
Okay, great. So again, I'd also like to start by thanking the authority for giving Bank of America the opportunity to senior manage your last transaction. As folks have alluded to, obviously with COVID changing the way we all do business, it's been a very interesting year. We priced your single family bond issue on October 21st, only 1 week after the multifamily deal had come into what was then a very busy market. And the single family deal actually served 3 different purposes. It provided money for new mortgages. It refunded bonds associated with the winding down of your single family NIBP indenture, which will save debt service going forward. And it used prepayments to retire long-term fixed rate bonds, replacing them with short-term bonds to warehouse volume cap at a much lower carrying cost. We senior managed the long-term refunding and the new money portion. That deal was for $147 million, and Wells Fargo financed the short-term refunding for $77 million.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
Sorry. Amy, can you turn the page? Next one.
Yeah, keep going down.
Keep going down. Okay.
Stop. That.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
You could probably go to the start of the prior page.
Right here?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So based upon your issuance in October, you sold over actually a 7-day period, $374 million, or 55% of your total volume in 2020. And so a lot of your volume got very compressed in that time frame. So let me briefly expand on a couple of the salient points. To start, when I say, or when Barbara said that it was a busy week, that's a bit of an understatement. So prior to the election, many people had decided to accelerate their transactions into the September and October timeframe. And obviously, when everybody tries to fit through the same door at the same time, it gets pretty crowded. And so to put Barbara's $19.9 billion into context, a normal week, you see about $8 billion of municipal volume. So this was, not only a busy week, this was a record-setting week. And this was after several prior weeks of also elevated volume. Actually, a quarter of this year's housing volume was done in the months of September and October. And so to the extent that you were a housing buyer during that point in time, there were a tremendous amount of transactions. We at Bank of America participated in over $3.5 billion of just housing deals. And this became very much a buyer's market because there was a lot of inventory and a lot of demand got satiated prior to your deal coming. Specific to your transaction, if we scroll to the next page, you'll see a couple of, perfect, stop there. You'll see that we had $27.5 million in retail orders, which is a pretty strong number considering that you had retail the week before. And so, there's obviously a tremendous demand for your paper. On the institutional side, there was 108 million of institutional orders, and this is versus 147 million, call it, of bonds. And then other syndicate members put in for $100 million of bonds where they go at risk. And those are a situation where they don't have a buyer behind that order. And so they're taking market risk to support your deal. And so your managers throughout the group supported your transaction. The Wells transaction, which was a short-term deal, was for $77 million. It was 3.4 times oversubscribed, whereas our transaction was not subscribed for. That transaction, they were able to actually lower your yields by about 2.5 basis points. And sort of the supply and demand dynamic is at the short end of the market, there continues to be very strong amounts of demand and money, whereas at the longer end, that portion of the market has gotten more gummed up, if you will. As it relates to the savings that CHFA was able to generate, because I know that as you were just talking about budgets, obviously savings is an important characteristic. So you were able to achieve refunding savings by taking out some high coupon older bonds from this old indenture. CFX, your cash flow consulting firm, calculated that you'll save, based upon a prepayment assumption, about $1.4 million from doing that portion of the transaction. If the bonds pay down more slowly, you can save more money. If you looked at it as a maturity to maturity matching, you could save as much as $5 million, but that would assume none of the loans prepaid. That's not necessarily a realistic assumption, but basically the minimum you'll save on that portion of the deal, call it $1.4 million. So after this transaction closes, as it relates to the old new issue bond indenture, there'll only be 11.8 million bonds left in that indenture, all of which will be callable next summer. And so that indenture's days are numbered, and you'll be able to eliminate that indenture from your thoughts about monitoring, and all of which is essentially a programmatic savings for you going forward. The Wells deal is a little harder to ballpark the savings, but just to give you a general sense of how powerful that redemption was, those bonds were sold at a 0.375% yield. And if you assume that the average coupon on the old debt that they took out was in the 2.5% range, over the time frame, which is a short time frame to the first optional redemption date on those bonds, you'll save about $845,000 in less than a year. So those two transactions taken together will generate in excess of $2 million of savings, help contributing to the financial savings that Hazim talks about whenever he's showing projected numbers and places where you're going to lower your cost of carry. We provided a pricing book, which I'd be more than happy to answer any questions on, or in this case, a pricing PDF. You can look through it at your leisure, but if you look, there are several tabs in that book. One is the summary, one are the municipal trends, and with the municipal trends, you'll see that over the course of the 2-week period leading up to the deal, rates had increased on the short end about 3 basis points and about 9 basis points on the longer end. And over the 3-month period before that, they had increased by about 25 basis points. And so essentially, rates had been running up in here coming into the transaction, largely because of the supply and the uncertainty in the market. You'll also see a bunch of bar charts in there, which show recent municipal issuance, and you'll see that those volumes of supply coming into the market, if you approach the deal, were increasing. And so as we all learned in economics, as supply increases, everything else being the same, the price will have to decrease for you to clear the market. And we saw that in this transaction as volume in the market soaked up the investment dollars and rates backed up or increased. Since this was the last transaction of the year, I wanted to sort of hit on a couple of quick points here, which I thought were interesting. I took a look back at the 4 public offerings you did this past year in 2020. And so let me relay a couple of statistics. You did a deal in January. The deal in January, PAC bonds, which sort of drive the pricing of your deal. Back then, the spread on those bonds was 56 basis points against the index, and you were able to sell that very important bond at a 1.44% yield. The max yield bond on that transaction was 245. In July, you came with your second transaction, and that was because when COVID hit, Hazim decided to delay doing the next deal, and he used a short-term funding mechanism to get you over that dislocation in the market. So by the time the market had stabilized, you did your July deal, and lo and behold, PAC spreads had widened out, but rates had come down, and so you actually sold the PAC bond at a 108 yield, and your max yield bond became a 205 bond. When you did your multifamily deal, so again, that was a fortuitous plan, because essentially you lowered your long-term cost over an extended period by delaying your deal. When you did the multifamily deal, they don't benefit by having those same sorts of bonds that you can essentially call out and get credit for a shorter average life. That deal had a max yield of 285. And then when you came through and you did this deal, spreads for the PAC bond had compressed to 68 basis points, but the PAC bond, we were able to achieve a sub 1% yield, and that bond sold at a 0.96%, and the max yield bond on that transaction was a 235. And so by waiting, you were able to avoid the dislocation in the market. PAC spreads at one point had blown out to an excess of 120 basis points. And so waiting was a very good strategy in this environment. People who sold into the environment which you delayed selling in sold long-term max yield bonds at 3%. By choosing to delay, in hindsight, that seemed to be a tremendous decision. So overall, the authority continues to drive down the cost of your debt well below 3%. Most of this year's issuance was well below 2.5%. And when you actually look at the yield that you finance on each of these individual deals on the single family side, it's below 2%. So thank you for the business. I'd be happy to go through any of the charts that you see, either now or if you have questions afterwards, then, because I know that you have time constraints, but look forward to doing future transactions for the authority, and thank you very much.
This is George. I have a question.
Sure.
And it's indirectly related to this, but may not be totally directly. You said that we've been able to lower our cost of funds, which is great, and I agree with the statement. But how does that compare to other authorities? And you may not have that answer. That may be an answer that Hazim may have to get from a financial advisor. And I realize that not two entities are the same, right? But
yeah,
since we do compare ourselves to other entities or other things, it says 1, 2. So I'd be curious to get that number sometime in the future if we don't have it today.
Yeah, I don't have it today. I can tell you that in general, what's happened over the course of time is that prepayments have continued to come in, and people have continued to recycle the volume cap associated with that and sell new bonds. And as rates have come down, everybody's cost of funds have come down. If you price up against another transaction in the market, typically Connecticut HFA, because you're a natural triple A in the market, will outprice everything out there. You sort of have Rolls Royce kind of pricing. Other issuers, like a Virginia as an example, they may have Bentley pricing, but it's not necessarily, but essentially you price as strong as anyone in the market at any point in time. Certain other issuers do different sorts of transactions where they'll sell mortgages directly or where they'll sell mortgages and take back strips. And so it's not easy to compare yourself to somebody else because everybody's business model looks quite different, but everybody is participating in markets. On any given day, you'll price better than the next guy because of the strength of your indenture, but somebody could hit a good market and lo and behold have a great result. So being lucky is also an important characteristic as opposed to just being smart.
I appreciate that because you now sound like me when we were doing the statistic plan and we're being compared to other states that I keep on saying, yeah, but we're not the same, right? So I understand that. But your other comment about that, the quality of our issuance, using your Royce or whatever, Royce example, it makes sense to me. And it's also important to hear because that justifies some of the decisions we made, right? And people may
wonder absolutely.
Why sometimes we make the decisions we make. Well, this is the reason, right?
Yeah, especially back in 2008 when the new issue bond program came out, the GSEs wanted AAA debt. And most people had to create a special indenture to credit enhance it to get up to that level. You were fortunate and you had that ability. So you could have sold them stuff out of your general indenture. You got to do it because you didn't hamper rather your issuing vehicle. But interestingly enough, very few people are triple for everything that they sell. You guys are, which is a wonderful position to be in. Other people can get there, but they have to do a lot of gymnastics with senior substructures, or they have to only sell government guaranteed mortgages. And even there, when they do it that way, S&P believes that the government isn't AAA. So you're rated higher than the federal government. And that's because of credit quality, over collateralization, and a variety of different management factors that go into it. So, you are sort of the gold standard out there.
I guess the question is, well, I understand that, Connecticut being a specialty state, our ratings are quite high. We have a very, very strong indenture, but the question is our historical spread to our benchmarks, and I understand also that we're following the market down, right, as interest rates fall, which is affecting us as we discovered on the budget talks. But the question really is our spread to our historical benchmarks changing or not? It seems to me that the answer is no, that we continue to trade at more or less our historical spreads, following the market down, maintaining our interest rate, cost of borrowing versus other worse rated or worse perceived agencies, or in places where there's not as much as a in-state tax advantage. Is my understanding of that correct?
Yeah, if you look at buyers have an ability to buy everybody's bonds out there in the market. And so it's very difficult for you to price your deal at a lower spread. Your bonds clear better. You will, in a decent market, you will probably outprice somebody on the long end by, call it 5 basis points at the best. But in order to clear a large transaction, and you sell $150 million size transactions, which are good sized housing transactions, you have to appeal to more than just the local Connecticut market. And so that clearing process essentially takes you up to a more national level. If the deal was a smaller deal, you might have a little bit more leverage. In a good market, you have a little bit more leverage. But in the end, an investor sitting there will look, and all of those guys are benchmarked against various indices. And so they have a hard time paying up incrementally a lot of money for that extra credit quality, because they're all compared down to the, 10th of a basis point versus their benchmark.
Just to add also a little footnote to what Joe was saying, We've started to see some investors prefer names that they would not normally be interested because of the pandemic assumptions they are making. At least this was the case a few weeks back when some of the Western states were not hit very high. And if not a credit issue, it could be a prepayment issue. So we saw names like, Oklahoma and Wyoming get extraordinary reception because nobody had much of it in their portfolio. And again, as Joe said, it's a national market. And to George's question about who waited and who went in, some of our clients were very full on a product and they really had to get into the market. Otherwise they would face some liquidity issues. So some people didn't have the benefit of waiting or couldn't wait. So.
Yeah, one last point to mention, this because it was a refunding and it was a single family deal, didn't have the benefit of sort of the ESG designation, but you have started to add ESG designations to your bonds. The multifamily deal had that benefit, and I don't know that that will necessarily drive pricing, but what it does do is it broadens the appeal of the bond, because now all of a sudden somebody gets an enhanced benefit for maybe the same exact price as not having that designation. And more what we're hearing is that the younger folks in the investment community find those designations to be, valuable, and they are trying to factor that into their purchasing decisions. So, I think that you are involved in the right trends also.
If there's no more questions, I'd like to move on to financial reports. Allison Murphy.
Good morning, all. Before you are the October monthly financial reports. On the revenue side, mortgage, loan, and investment interest revenue are coming in $11 million below budget for the 10 months ending October 31st, and $10.8 million lower than prior year. Revenue shortfalls are in part continuing to be a result of the decrease in single-family production. The amount of single-family first mortgages originated during the first 10 months of this year is $178 million lower compared to the same time period last year. Additionally, single-family loan prepayments have increased by $132 million year over year. The net effect of the two is a portfolio reduction of $310 million. Investment interest revenue shortfalls continue to be driven by our decrease in rates on the authority's short-term investments. The average stiff rate for 2020 is 1.57% lower than last year. On the expense side, bond interest expense is below budget by $14.2 million and is $6.5 million lower than prior year. The reasons for these variances hasn't really changed from the prior months. Administrative expenses are coming in $5 million under budget and $1.2 million less than prior year. When you exclude salaries and benefits of $20.5 million, the current year-to-date expenses are $798,000 lower than prior years. Are there any questions?
If there's no questions for Allison, let's go on to delinquency and forbearance. John Chilson.
Good morning. For the month of October, the authority purchased 106 loans totaling $20 million, of which 92 totaling $17.5 million were securitized, or 87% of our production. The remaining 14 loans totaling $2.6 million were whole loans. The average loan size was $190,000. The October month-end mortgage-backed security balance was $2.37 billion, which is a decrease of $50 million from the prior month, while the whole loan portfolio through the end of September decreased by 116 loans, or $14.8 million, ending the month the portfolio balance of $1.5 billion. The overall delinquency rate month over month declined by 6 basis points to 3%. The carrying balance of loans in foreclosure year over year increased actually $1.8 million to $43.4 million, with the total number of loans in foreclosure increasing by 18 year over year. The month of October, the authority also funded 60 down payment assistance loans totaling $384,000 with an average loan size of $6,400. Approximately 57% of the October borrowers utilize the down payment assistance program. In regard to single family forbearances, as the end of September, whole loan borrowers in forbearance declined by 22 loans from the prior months to 946 loans in forbearance, involving $700,000 in monthly P&I payments on a UPB of $119 million, or 7.8% of our whole loan portfolio. But nearly half of those borrowers, 48% in forbearance, made a mortgage payment in the month of September. For the month of October, the number of loans in forbearance climbed again by 47 to 899, involving $669,000 of monthly P&I payments and a UPB of $113.5 million. Turning to our multifamily portfolio, the authority closed 7 new multifamily loans in the month of October, bringing the increasing the number of loans in the portfolio by a net of 4 to 505 loans with a UPB of $1.26 billion. Our multifamily permanent loan delinquencies increased by 1 loan to a total of 8, and our construction loan delinquencies increased by 1 to a total of 2, with an overall delinquency rate of 4.6%. And with regard to multifamily forbearances, there were no new forbearance agreements signed in October. So year to date, there's been a total of only 7 forbearance agreements signed, encompassing 8 loans, representing $134,000 a monthly P&I on a UPB of $23.8 million. Any questions?
So no questions for John. We'll move on to the Finance Audit Monthly Tracking Report. Sherry Lampert.
Morning. This month in multifamily area, you'll see that there is some additional funding for Armstrong Court in Greenwich, which was a deal that was approved by the board in June. And there were some cost revisions resulting in this request. And in the multifamily area, all the funding, as you can see, has been utilized pretty much. In the homeownership area, there were 106 first mortgage loans and 60 DAP loans. These are lower than last October. And at this point at year end, it looks like we'll be around the 1,700 to 1,800 loan mark by the end of the year. We also had higher prepayments, as Allison has talked about, and that's it. Any questions?
Before we go to the final item, Hazima, I was wondering if there's a way we could reflect in the minutes that this committee wants to thank Jared for his distinguished service as chair of this board and all his hard work, and wish him well on his new position. So if we could somehow get that into the minutes to reflect the intent of this committee to wish him well. And
sure. Absolutely. Terry?
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah.
And our last item is an action item. It's the minutes of the last Financing Committee meeting, October 29th. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Have a roll call.
Okay. Gary Abraham.
Aye.
Tim Hodges.
Aye.
Kathy McKinnon.
Aye.
George Perez.
Yes.
Franklin Perry.
Aye.
Sarah Sanders.
Aye.
I do not believe Moindhouse. Motion carries.
Okay, and I will call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.